One, two, three. All right. Good evening, everyone. Kasama po natin ulit si former Associate Justice Carpio, and of course, my colleague also, fellow columnist at the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Salamat, Justice, for joining us again.
Good evening, Richard. Good evening to our viewers.
My goodness, daming ganap, daming ganap. Akala pa natin last week things are already crazy. Obviously, I want to talk to you about itong proposal to expel the Chinese embassy folks. I mean, potentially all the way to the ambassador and what could be the implications. Gusto ko rin pag-usapan ng konting squad, itong bagong quad ng kumbaga may Justice League na rin. No? Medyo ginagaya na tayo na Justice Carpio. Meron ng squad goals. Australia, Philippines, US, Japan. In the context of course, also of Balikatan, West Philippines Districts. Pero bago tayo pumunta dyan, Justice Carpio, meron na tayong bagong domestic politics muna tayo ng konti with, of course, an international dimension. First of all, what is your reading of this whole ICC discussions right now? So not only Senator Trillanes, but a number of other legal experts, including those directly involved in the ICC procedures. Alam ko may confidentiality niyan, but what they couldn't deny is based on sa timetable na ICC, within the year, magkakaroon na itong, well, looks like it, warrants of arrest na. First of all, what is your read on this ICC issue before we talk about yung mga coup plots na pinag-usapan ni Senator Trillanes?
Well, there appears to be a lot of movement because it was officially reported that the ICC has been recruiting translators from Cebuano to English, from
Saya,
Tagalog.
yeah.
So that means that's they're preparing for a trial at the moment because for the witnesses they need translators because the witnesses might be more familiar with Tagalog or Cebuano. So they're precisely looking for translators. So that's the big giveaway that there could be a trial soon.
And soon your understanding from the timetable, kasi may mga deadline timetable din yan, is siguro within the next 3 to 6 months, no? I mean, to have an educated guess on this. In short, before midterm elections, I want to be very particular. Before midterm elections, right?
Yeah, I think within the year.
Yeah, within the year.
Within the year.
I mean, imagine kung magkasabay pa yan sa election sa October na filing of candidates. I mean, this is crazy. Again, I want to also ask you, Justice Carpio. I asked Jay Batumbakal, our good friend, the other day also about this. Gaano ka mahalaga na mag-cooperate si BBM sa ICC sa konteksto ng West Philippine Sea disputes? Because if you want the world to be on our side when it comes to rule of law, rules-based international order, don't you want to also show that you have rule of law at home and you're gonna cooperate with international bodies? Kasi parang weird, ne? Ayaw mo sa ICC pero gusto mo sa arbitral tribunal at on clause, hindi pwede yan, di ba? You cannot pick and choose. You have to show consistency of conviction.
Yes, to a certain extent, because the EU, they actually are the originators of the ICC. They're fully in support. They're actually financing the ICC. But the US, of course, is not a member. It is not ratified. So, hati, no? But the EU would like to see us rejoin or at least cooperate. And in fact, the Supreme Court ruled. There is a ruling of the Supreme Court in the case filed by, I think it was Pimentel or Cayetano, I can't remember. The Supreme Court said, okay, the issue was whether the withdrawal by President Duterte was effective or not. The Supreme Court said, yes, effective, but there is a one-year period where they could continue with the prosecution for crimes, crimes committed while we were a party. So, in fact, and then the Supreme Court said there that we are obligated to cooperate. And it was a unanimous decision. We are obligated to cooperate. Some are saying that this is just an obiter dictum. In other words, it's just an aside. But I don't think so, because that goes into the very question of whether the withdrawal was effective. So if you're talking of effectivity of withdrawal, so you have to look at the residual issue, whether there is a phase-out period. because that's part of the withdrawal.
Residual jurisdiction in that case, no? Although if I'm not mistaken, the former chief prosecutor, I'm not sure about Karim Khan, but the previous one, parang may sinabi din sila, Justice, na even if hindi ka kasama sa ICC, if you have committed crimes against humanity or mass atrocities, pwede pa rin pumasok. I mean, for instance, Putin of Russia, Russia never joined ICC last time I checked, just like the US. But they issued the warrant of arrest against Putin last year.
Yeah, only because the crime was alleged to have been committed within Ukraine. And Ukraine made a manifestation or a communication to the ICC that while they are not ratifying, they are saying that they will allow the ICC to have jurisdiction over offenses committed within their territory. So that's why
correct.
Yeah, the ICC issued a warrant of arrest against Putin because of that.
Right. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned the U.S. case, because the U.S. obviously didn't raise any criticisms when Putin got the warrant of arrest. But now there are news that Netanyahu or some top Israeli officials may face something similar in the ICC. And now you have U.S. senators openly threatening ICC. And for sure, behind the scenes, there's pressure being put on the ICC. So you're right. I mean, it's not only that the U.S. is not part of the Rome Statute. We have evidence of U.S. senators, if not the U.S. government, openly opposing or trying to frustrate when it doesn't go in its own favor. Except Duterte is not the favorite of America, so I'm not sure they'll have an issue. Yeah, that's interesting. Except I don't think U.S. will mind at all if ICC goes after Duterte the way they didn't mind at all when it went after Putin.
Well, the U.S. has not issued any statement against the probable issuance of a warrant of arrest on Duterte by the ICC. They haven't made any comment on that. But if you recall, the ICC prosecutor before the present one, before Khan, Shuda,
Yeah.
She was actually barred from entering the U.S., I think, because she started an investigation on
Afghanistan, no?
Afghanistan, yes.
Violations by U.S. servicemen.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, in short, US in this, wala silang credibility or moral ascendancy on this issue, to put it nicely. And we know, of course, from the literature, the Bush administration was very aggressively against ICC and the Rome Statute. Kaya big deal na sumali tayo in 2011 despite being a US ally, but by that time, it's Obama. Now, I don't want to go too much into the ICC. I only wanted to emphasize, Justice, na, you know, don't you think na importante na we show now we're a country of a rule of law, diba? Kasi if you want to be, you know, at the receiving end of international legal instruments support on the West Philippines issue, perhaps to a certain degree also you want to show that you are a country of rule of law and democracy. From my understanding, though, is when Marcos was in Germany, and I interviewed the German ambassador on this, very strong yung push ni Chancellor Scholz, among other European leaders, for Marcos to, you know, to cooperate or at least, you know, not to frustrate itong ICC procedures, since we are supposed to be fellow democracies, right? I mean, that's my also understanding. So our European friends for sure are putting some good encouragement, not pressure, if I can put it that way.
Yes, well, I go by the decision of the Supreme Court that we have to cooperate even as we are no longer a member because of that provision for crimes committed while you were a party. The ICC will still have jurisdiction, and we have still a duty to cooperate with respect to those cases which happened while we were still a member. And that's my position,
right,
because that's the pronouncement of the Supreme Court.
Right, and by that time you were no longer in the Supreme Court, right? Diba, Justice? Retired.
Yeah, I was no longer in the Supreme
yeah,
Court.
Yeah, si Leonen.
Leonen was the ponente. It was a unanimous decision.
Right. Absolutely, which is sometimes rare, you know, on things as. But just another question. Sorry, curious lang ako. Bakit silent yung ating constitution dun sa exit from treaties scenario? I mean, I find this strange. Shouldn't that have been anticipated by anyone? Don't other countries have that? Similar democracies? Na concurrent dapat ng Senate, etc.?
Well, Well, it follows that it should be terminated in the same way that it was entered into. That, in other words, the president ratified by the Senate. But in this case, there was no ratification by the Senate because the Supreme Court said the Senate did not object. I mean, I don't agree with that.
Yun
Because,
nga, di ba? Medyo, honestly, Justice, thank you for pointing that out. I just find that a little bit
yeah,
queasy, to
because
be honest. Yeah.
in the case of ratification, it has to be a positive act by the Senate. They can, if they don't act on it, it's not ratified. So it should be the same case in withdrawal. The president wants to withdraw, but uh, if the Senate doesn't do anything, then there's no positive approval of the withdrawal because both must act. That's the requirement of the Constitution.
Exactly. Thank you, Justice, for saying that. I wanted to hear that from someone because for me, again, who am I to disagree with the Supreme Court? But I found that thing a bit queasy, right? The whole thing a bit strange. I want to ask about
but there's something. There's one
yes,
something.
please.
This is what the Supreme Court said. Because in this case, the majority did not object, then it is deemed to have been. They're deemed to have approved it in effect. But that's not the way the Constitution is worded. There has to be a positive act. I mean, the law, the a bill does not become a law unless there's a positive act. Unless the Constitution itself says that if the president does not veto it within 30 days, then it lapses into law. But there is no such thing. So, in other words, if the Constitution requires consent, it must work both ways. Consent to approve and consent to terminate.
Yeah, I find it a leap of logic, if not leap of presumption, right? Na just because hindi nagreklamong Senado, then okay. I mean, I just find it weird. I mean, what is your indicator to say walang umangal sa Senado, right? Just because Duterte was popular back then. So I'm glad, Justice, you mentioned this because I'm not a constitutional expert, but honestly, even as a non-constitutional expert, I found the thing a bit strange. But this is important because yung update natin is DOJ gave a briefer to Marcos on scenarios on the potential warrants of arrest. But the other thing is, there are also discussions, from what I understand, about us rejoining the ICC. Now, if the Constitution is silent on the exit part, supposedly, per itong Supreme Court ruling na yan, or implication of Supreme Court, then rejoining that should be also unilateral executive decision or dapat dadaan ulit sa Senado. The reason I'm saying dadaan ulit sa Senado dapat is, I know that's your stance probably, but may bato eh. May Bongo, may Robin Hood Padilla. I mean, now suddenly it's asymmetrical that the exit you gave a free pass to Duterte, re-entering, you're giving the Duterte people, pro-Duterte people, again, a veto power. I find that problematic.
Well, I think we have to do it right, regardless of the composition in the Senate. And I think to rejoin, the president must approve and the Senate must consent.
And you think there could be enough number? The concurrence is what? 2/3 for treaty?
Two-thirds.
Kaya yan. I think just about. Yeah, just about.
Just about.
Just about. Yeah. Just about.
The numbers will be there.
And if this is after 2025 election, you never know. Mukhang bati si Amy Marcos, delikado, baka hindi makapasok sa top 12 eh. I'm looking at the surveys. It's very competitive. Grabe.
Yeah, it's
baka bato lang at
crowded.
Bongo. Yeah, baka bato Bongo lang makapasok from the DDS camp, and let's see about the other Dutertes if they run. Now, let's transition now, of course, to speaking of ICC, one of the persons who has been advising BBM, at least until he became complete opposition, is Harry Roque. I just want to ask you, Justice Carpio, because you're not just a former top level jurist. I mean, you were part of the Supreme Court. You are also a democracy advocate, right? You are a believer in the EDSA project, from my understanding, or at least the promise of the EDSA project. How do you feel about certain people who are presidential spokesman of Duterte after being an ex-human rights lawyer, supporting the UNI team during the SMNI debate, if I can call that a debate, saying wala siyang nahanap na ebidensya na may maling ginawa ng Marcos, in a sense by saying wala daw kaso sa korte, wala daw Supreme Court. And then now, invoking people power, BBM resigned, talking about Marcos court cases in the US, implying, and interestingly, I heard this also from my friends in China, implying that the reason naging matapang ang BBM sa China is because baka yung mga Amerikano nagpakabait on issues that you and I mean, what's at sinabi niya balentong ba yung term ni si BBM, but wait, speaking of balento, I mean, like, this is nuts. What's going on here, Justice Carpio?
Well, that's I think vintage Harry Roque, because remember before he joined the Duterte cabinet, he said that Duterte was a serial murderer. He said that on camera, and then he became the spokesperson. He joined the cabinet. So I think that's the way some people are. So we should just take note of that.
Okay. Well, speaking of vintage, well, I mean, what is your read on Duterte? Si Duterte, magulo talagang tao yan, nanggugulo yan. Do you think, from your understanding of vintage Duterte, do you think he will be, again, di umano'y, involved in some destabilizing, I mean, Senator Trillanes openly talking about coup attempts, right? Ikaw, what is your understanding of vintage Duterte on this? You dealt with him a lot in the not best and friendliest terms, yeah.
Well, the son and the two sons who are in government have asked that demanded that President Marcos Jr. step down, in effect, to allow the sister to become president. And the uh, former President Duterte himself has been repeating that the incumbent president is bangag, and saying, I mean, he keeps on repeating that the incumbent president is a drug addict. And I mean, that's the worst thing that you can say against a sitting president. So I think their division is irreconcilable already. I mean, uh, the point of no return has long been reached.
Yeah,
And
as we say in Ilocano, awanan. It's over. It's over. Awanan. Wala na to. I mean, speaking of, again, before we go, papunta na tayo sa China, your favorite country and embassy in Manila. Justice, speaking of BBM, vintage BBM, I was a bit impressed. Kutob nga namin, ito, alam ko mabasha. Pero feeling ko napanood nila kami ni Ronald Llamas kasi sabi namin, dapat matapang si BBM, dapat babardagulan niya yung mga marites na yan. So, kahapon, tinanong siya sa Jensen, di ba, about itong Ahente Morales. Sabi niya, ano yan eh? Jukeboxan yan eh. Parang jukebox king yan. Lalagay mo ng coins. Kakanta siya ng... I mean, that was funny. I mean, I never saw BBM like that, yung talagang bardagulan. Professional lang. Eh. Parang sinintia Villan to eh, di ba? So, do you think BBM is stepping up also? Kasi ang tawag sa kanya ni Marlica, yung magaling na vlogger, ay kuting, di ba? Hindi tayo, pero kuting. Pero hindi, medyo si kuting nagle-level up na. Medyo baby tiger na, baby cub na.
well, I think he has to respond because the attacks are becoming too vicious now. I mean, paulit-ulit. I mean, he has really to fend off the attack. He cannot, he's not a Teflon guy, no? So to preserve his credibility, he has to fight back.
Yeah, he's not Teflon. His numbers went down by 14 points just the other quarter. So, wag siya mag-feeling Duterte na he can get away with it. Yeah, so I appreciate the president fighting back. And you have to draw the line, di ba? Binabastos ka, presidente ka.
Yeah.
Kawawa pa si Maricel Soriano, dinamay pa nila doon. Pero kutob ko, sumikat lalo si Maricel ngayon. Yung mga Gen Z na hindi ko kilala. Sino to? Napakagaling to ah. Tapos si Bato de la Rosa, feeling ko hindi gagano yung career niya. Gusto niya maging Tito Boy Abunda. Totoo ba na ganitong araw, ito ang ginawa mo? Totoo ba na binugbog mo yung dalawang ano? Ano sila bugbugin? Dalawa sila. Wala nang career ni Bato. Tapos na yung showbiz career niya. Justice Garber, let's go to this. Wow. Expulsion of the Chinese ambassador. Ito na yung level of discussion ngayon. Is it that bad? I mean, the reason I'm saying it's that bad is, Justice Carpio, what's going on with this mayor go situation in Tarlac? Biglang napakita nung 2022, naging mayor bigla. Hindi namin mahanap yung kanyang birth certificate until 17 siya. Hindi namin alam kung sino yung tatay niya, nanay. Nag-homeschooling daw siya buong buhay niya. Wala rin ebidensya. Nothing suspicious here. Oh, and by the way, malapit itong Tarlac town na yan sa Clark Air Base, right? So like, nothing suspicious here, right, Justice Carpio?
Well, it's very easy to dig into her past because you just ask her who were her friends when she was growing up, because she was growing up in the town, no? In Bamban. So she has to present people who knew her when she was in her teens, no? So she just popped up. So very strange, I think. But we have to get into the facts. We have to gather more facts.
Yeah, I mean, it's just insane, the whole thing. Bigla na lang lumitaw, 2022, naging mayor na. I mean, this is like worse than Banana Republic. I mean, you can just become a mayor in another country. Again, of course, we are very careful not to get into prejudice and all of that. So, nakakabahala when, people try to make xenophobic comments. But at the same time, hindi naman tayo pwede mang lang na ini-infiltrate tayo ng ganyan, assuming this is a case of infiltration. Speaking of which, now there's an open accusation by our top officials, NSC, DND, na baka itong, di umano'y, itong mga embassy ng China dito ay involved na talaga into, for the lack of better term, what the Soviet Union used to do in Europe during the Cold War period. I mean, influence operations, disinformation campaign, mga accusations of deep fake audios, mga ganun. Like, wow, this is like Cold War. This is like Berlin. And what's going on here?
Well, I think you have to go back to the time of former President Duterte, where they were very loose in the protocol. I mean, the Chinese ambassador could visit the president anytime in Davao, and the president would go to his hotel or to his where he's staying, and it was just like they were good friends. They would drink and just talk the whole night. So there was this breakdown of protocol during the Duterte administration as far as China was concerned, because the other embassies maintained that protocol. They could not, whenever they want to talk to the president, they of course it through proper channels. But the Chinese ambassador could just go there anytime. And I think it cascaded down to even some embassy officials when they talk to our military people. I mean, they could just text our AFP chief of staff or the army chief, the navy chief, and it's very strange. It never happens in other countries. So the Chinese embassy people would just go to Westcom and talk to the Westcom guy without coursing it through the proper channels. So I think it started because of that culture during the time of President Duterte.
You're saying trickle-down recklessness from a
Yes.
national security. I mean, that's the best term I can.
Yes.
This is trickle-down, cluster mess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget also Chinese airplanes, aircrafts landing in Davao without, I don't know, anyone knowing in AF. I mean, that was crazy, right? Parang Banana Republic.
Yeah.
But Justice Garby,
there's one more point. And this is a lesson to all government officials. They should never just talk to Chinese embassy officials because they can easily be misquoted. They could be taped. So they should never talk. They should refer the Chinese embassy people to the DFA. Let DFA do the talking. And if DFA wants input from them, they can join. But they should never on their own just entertain these Chinese embassy officials when these Chinese embassy officials appear in their offices. I mean, we are very friendly people. I mean, if the ambassador visits you, of course you would entertain, but they have to think twice because of this incident. Because of this incident, they should be on guard now.
Well, first of all, Justice Gar, let me say I vehemently disagree with you because an ambassador is allowed to talk to a provincial governor. Last time I checked.
No, not when he will say that, oh, I am negotiating an agreement on sovereign rights with the governor. I mean, you don't do that.
Just saying, like if I'm a governor, Dumating yung ambassador ng bayan ko. Welcome to the province of China,
Yeah,
sir.
you are welcome, but you do not negotiate on, okay, the mission, the resupply mission will be one-to-one, only one Coast Guard vessel, and one from the Philippines, one from the China, and you will only bring food and water, no construction materials. That's a different thing. That's not being courteous anymore. Those are substantive matters
Yes.
involving sovereign rights. And a general just cannot discuss that without the DFA people around. So,
Mm.
I mean, of course, when you meet these foreign diplomats, you will be courteous to them, even if you're a government official. But you never discuss matters of sovereign rights, sovereignty, and make an agreement.
I want to ask on this because, I was on also to Admiral Ong the other day, and di ba may protocols yan? Like, if you deal with the country na medyo, for the lack of better term, sinasakop yung bansa mo, or what, you use intelligence officials to oversee it. Dapat both sides record it. Everything has, para wala nang compromat, di ba? Wala nang
That's right.
blackmailing.
Yeah, yeah.
This one looks like
Yeah,
bara-bara. I mean,
yeah.
probably these guys have a lot of compromat we don't know about.
That's it. So this is really a warning to everybody, all government officials, including military officials. Uh, they should just refrain from talking to Chinese embassy officials without the presence of DFA people. No?
And intelligence officials, I mean, who should know
Mm.
protocol. I mean, KGB level na to. I mean, Justice Carpio, I mean, on a side note, probably this should also apply to people like us, right? I mean, even if you're not government, if you're quite a thought leader or media professional, mamaya may sasabihin ka, i-audio nila, tapos they'll take it out of
It's
context,
okay
diba?
with me because nobody can claim that I can make an agreement on behalf of the Philippines. We
Baka
are
may audio
civilian.
sila na may sinabi ka, sabihin, ito si Carpio, ano yan, di ba? Gagawin ng
Yeah, because
blackmail yan, di ba?
they will be laughed at if they say that we committed the government. I mean, we cannot commit the government. Obviously, we're not government officials now.
Justice Carpio, so just to end on this part of the episode before we go more into the West Philippines issue, in particular itong squad and Balikatan, I want to get also your view on that before we end this episode. Nakakabahala ba ito? Kasi for sure, if we expel some of their top-level officials, magre-retaliate din sila, and then less there will be communication channels. Again, as I said, diplomacy is, if diplomacy were just for friends, it's not diplomacy, right? It's happy times. You need diplomacy precisely with problematic counterparts, right? So aren't you worried about the diplomatic channels collapsing here as the ratings are going? Although, of course, I squarely blame China for doing this. Everyone is now scared to talk to them. Baka mamaya i-record ka nila, tapos anong gagawin nila dyan?
Well, that's to be expected. We have a valid ground to expel whoever this Chinese guy is, and the Chinese will retaliate, and that's accepted. But it will end there. This has happened several times between the U.S. and Russia, or
Yes,
even
Russia. I wanted to
the
say
USSR.
Russia. Yeah.
Yeah, they expel each other, and they expect that their counterpart will be expelled also, and that's the end of it.
And
So,
you think even the ambassador, the problem is, I mean, this might go all the way to the ambassador, right? But I mean, how do you compare Zhao with the Xian? I mean, like Zhao, the former ambassador, seemed to be far more sophisticated, I would say, even though, of course, meron siyang advantage na dealing with Duterte. But he was there even during Aquino's time. 2014 pa lang, alam ko si Zhao was there. So baka may problema din ang ambassador dito, hindi kaya?
well,
Aside from the whole modus operandi.
well, I don't know him personally, but I don't think we should go to that level, expelling the ambassador. There are many people below him that we can expel, and if you do that, it will not escalate anymore. But if you expel the ambassador himself, that's a serious action.
O in short, yung mga ano na lang niya, yung mga parang Harry Roque niya, yung mga ano lang niya, mga spokesman niya, yung mga ganun niya.
The deputy or
Yeah,
the
exactly.
political counselor.
Like that, or I don't know, charge d'affaires or something like that at highest probably. Now, going back to this, Justice Carpio, what is your read naman of the Philippines and the whole squad thing? Is this squad with Australia, US, Japan, is it for the gram, for the photo op, or do you think there's something more substantial here in addition to joint patrols becoming a new normal in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, if you compare it to the Quad, in the Quad you have one party there, India, that has no uh, defense treaty with the U.S. Here in the Squad, all the parties have a defense treaty with the U.S. And so this is more. This is actually the more substantive uh, uh, grouping as far as the South China Sea is concerned. But if you look at the larger Indo-Pacific, well, you really need India with you if you want to cover the entire Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, my understanding with India is that, of course, there's a lot of tension and disappointment with them. I mean, the Indians are very clear. This is all about their own great power moment, right? And I remember when I asked some Munich Security Conference, the Quad panel there, is this the Asian NATO? Obviously, it's not. But just to provoke discussion, si Jai Shankar, their very outspoken foreign minister. In fairness, dapat ganun sana si Harry Roque, yung parang Jai Shankar type ni Modi. He went out and said, no, we are here just, essentially saying alliance of convenience ito. This is not a treaty alliance. We work where it serves us. And alam natin, India, Russia, bromance, beshi. China, ingat sila kasi may border disputes din sila and they don't want to get into fight with China anytime soon kasi may mga concerns din sila. So, the Philippines, although mas maliit sa India and all of that, it looks like a much more aligned country. Hindi lang treaty ally, pero in terms of values, orientation, China position, right? So this looks like a more swak quad for dealing with China. Because I know naturally people say, what about South Korea? I'll say, what about North Korea, right? Ang laki ng problema ng South Korea sa North Korea. Impit sila dun eh. At least the Philippines, kahit mas mahina tayo sa India and Korea, military-wise, we can be very helpful. And speaking of which, how do you read these balikatan exercises? We had an exercise in Cagayan where we essentially simulated China taking over Batanes or Mavulis or something like that and taking it back. I mean, clearly the Philippines is leveraging its geography, right? And we're really preparing for a Taiwan contingency.
Well, I think we also have to show to China that we are not helpless, we are not defenseless. And this is it. I mean, where the Americans brought in their Typhoon missiles, and it's a message to China that the missiles from the Philippines could reach them. I think it's a matter of messaging.
And
of course,
right.
We have our BrahMos already. That would cover the Spratlys, but that won't those missiles won't reach the Chinese mainland. But this Typhoon class of missiles will reach the mainland. So it's a powerful signal.
And what do you think about the whole HIMARS exercises, Sea Stars, sinking a ship? I mean, there were also exercises in South China Sea, and for the first time, nagkaroon ng drills outside the 12 nautical miles territorial sea natin, and also France joining in. And the French are about to start their negotiations over a reciprocal access agreement. How do you see those exercises going? How are they? Yeah.
I'm very in favor of them because once they conduct naval drills in our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea, they're actually telling China that under the arbitral award, this is the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, and there is freedom of navigation, including naval drills. And that's exactly what we're doing. So in fact, they are enforcing the arbitral award. For me, it's the most tangible enforcement of the arbitral award because you're using warships to say that this is the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines per the arbitral award. So
that there's no 9-dash line. Yeah, and that 9-dash line is nonsense. That we don't follow 9-dash line. Kasi nasa loob ng 9-dash line yung exercises eh. And walang pakialam France, go pa rin.
Yeah, that's exactly the message being sent, that your 9-dash line doesn't exist.
And you think, Justice, we should do this every year na? More regular?
Yes, we should.
Ito na dapat talaga.
It should be done so that it becomes routine and it will sink into the minds of everybody that that is really the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, because they keep on invoking the arbitral award, and that's to our benefit.
And last point, Justice, on this. First of all, what is your read of the Marcos administration foreign policy so far along these lines? Are we doing what would have had happened had anyone aside from Duterte won 2016? In a sense that kung si Grace po yung president or Maro has, Binay, debate natin yan. parang ito yung gagawin nila, di ba? I mean, what we're seeing
Yes,
now in 2024 should have been what happened in 2017, right?
that's correct. This is really the logical move, because once you have the orbital award, then you should press your advantage already. Ask the allied countries to join you in joint patrols, because that's the most robust enforcement of the orbital award. And China couldn't do anything. China is totally helpless when the naval powers of the world conduct naval drills in area where they claim it is their national territory. Remember, everything within the 10 line, China says it's their national territory. So can you just imagine US and European warships and we ourselves conducting naval drills in what China considers to be their national territory? It's a really big slap on their face, and they couldn't do anything.
And you think if we have this RAA, reciprocal access agreement with the French, with the Japanese, baka we're looking at regular joint drills, hindi lang patrols in the 200 nautical miles.
We need those. We have to really to strengthen our alliances, because that's all we've got right now. As we build up a credible self-defense force, we must rely on alliances. Even when we have the credible self-defense force, we must still strengthen our alliances, because you're facing a huge country, a nuclear armed country with the largest navy in the world, largest coast guard in the world, largest submarine force in the world. So how do you fight a country like that? You just have to get allies.
Justice, so we're about to end this episode, but I'll have one question also about something more inspirational. But what do you think Marcos should do in the coming years? What should be the next logical step? So you said what he's doing right now is what any logical president not named Duterte would have done anyway. So there's nothing genius about what Marcos is doing. Let's be absolutely clear, because I think some people are going gaga. Oh, Marcos Jr. is such a genius. No, he's not. He's just doing what any self-respecting Filipino leader should have done. Tama naman si BBM dun sa speech niya sa Australia, di ba? Sabi niya, what I'm doing is not my preference, it's what my people want. More like what any people, any self-respecting people want. But what should be done looking forward in the next 4 years?
The most critical thing that we should do is to get the gas in Reed Bank. That is really the most critical thing, because our economy will be devastated if we have to import LNG. It will be very expensive. Foreign locators here will transfer because they cannot compete. So that is really the crux of the matter. All of this dangerous maneuvers, it's really pointing to Reed Bank. Can we get the gas in Reed Bank? If we can, then it doesn't matter if China doesn't recognize our EEZ, because the bottom line is the country that gets the gas wins, because that's the wealth of the exclusive economic zone. So we have to get the gas, otherwise we're in big, deep trouble.
I just have a question, because I was talking to Jay also about this. CNOOC of China was supposed to be involved in some joint exploration service contract.
Yes.
Service.
Yes.
So CNOOC companies involved. There's an Australian, British one, right? There's so sino mga involved dyan sa Reed Bank?
Well, the MOU that was signed by Duterte says that the Chinese will participate through the service contract system of the government. We have issued a service contract to Reed Bank, Service Contract 72, in favor of Forum Energy. So CNOOC will enter into a contract with Forum Energy. It will be CNOOC that will be the subcontractor of Forum Energy to get the gas. And that was supposed to be the template for the entire South China Sea. China will get maybe 30% or 40% of everybody's for doing the hard work of getting the gas, spending money for getting the gas. They get 40% of the profit, and that will apply South China Sea wide. Imagine if China will get 40% of all the oil and gas in the South China Sea. That's a big win for them.
Win-win yan. I mean, that's the win-win. That's a win-win.
That's the win-win. But at the last minute, China said, you remove that provision in the service contract which says that the oil and gas belongs to the Philippines. Remove that provision that Philippine law will govern. And because of those two demands, we just said, oh, sorry, we cannot violate our constitution.
They were too greedy. They were too greedy. They
Yeah,
wanted
they
too
were too
much.
greedy.
Too much. Yeah, too
Yeah.
much. Kasalanan nila yan. So that means they have bad diplomacy. They don't know how to take the win, as Biden would put it. Take the win, right? Take the win. Wag mong pilitin. Don't make it worse, right? And that's what they did. Binakaw nila. But going back to what you said, paano mo naman sisisihin ng China kung yung presidente natin was acting like a governor of their province? Right? If you have such a sabog president and sa tingin mo, mananalo naman si BBM, ang tingin naman nila kay BBM is not too different from Digong. Back then, I cannot blame China.
Yeah, well, they thought that they could buy off our leaders. I mean, that's their modus operandi. But for BBM, I mean, uh, he will become very unpopular if we cannot get the gas in Reed Bank, while Malaysia is able to get their gas, Indonesia is able to get their gas, and we have to import very expensive LNG. We'll have high inflation, we will have high unemployment, and the prices will go up. It will be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, again, let me disagree with you vehemently, Justice. I think China is correct to think that they can buy politicians. The question is, can they keep those politicians once they bought them? I think that's what, yun na hindi nila nakita. Parang akala nila, ito na yan. Yung pala, ay, hindi, medyo mahirap to. Mahirap. Something, maintenance ang wala sila, no? Again, di umanoy. We're not saying anything pero malapit na ma-expel yung ambassador nila. Tuloy-tuloy ito. Just a question. Wala pang update kay Sir Kibuloy? Every week gawin natin yan. Wala pang update. Anong marites sa Davao? Justice Carpio, wala pa rin Kibuloy.
Well, it looks like he's still in hiding. But I think they will have to produce him because the PNP will be the laughing stock if they cannot.
Yun nga eh, they have to produce him kasi paano mo mahuling si Digong pag may warrant of arrest na kung ito nga hindi mo mahuli-huli. Justice Carpio, so I'm trying to do something like Ezra Klein of New York Times, which is, do you have recommendations of readings and your own works na pwede basahin ng mga tao? So Jay actually recommended A Rizal a Century Hence. And I was just reading it the other night and it's so inspiring and interesting. And the German traveler, he also nandun sa excerpt sa opening of the essay, he predicted that US will be the dominant power here in part of the world together with China and Russia and all of that. So fascinating read. I really suggest you guys read it. And marami siyang sinasabi niya in a sense na if only we Filipinos can go beyond our tribalistic dissensions and all and be a unified country, dapat kick out na natin yung mga Espanyol 1600 pa lang, di ba? But if we're just gonna be okay with who's the latest or if the neck is used to the yoke, as they put it very poetically, walang forever na tayong ganyan. Ikaw, ano yung mga inspiring works you go back to, whether it's Ilustrados, whether it's someone else, whether it's international law luminaries, and also some of your works, Justice Carpio. Of course, I know about your book. Thank you for the copy. Fantastic copy you gave me. But for people who want to know more about West Philippines and these issues, anong dapat babasahin nila?
The internationalists written by lawyers who teach international law, and their principal theory is that international law can prevent wars, can save the world. And in fact, that's the only way we can prevent a third world war. That's why, before the 1945 UN Charter, the rule in international law was might is right. If you have a dispute with your neighbor, with your neighboring country, you go to war, you win, you get their territory, and that's valid. I mean, you can be the aggressor, but if you win, what you did was correct, and you are
the right
rewarded
to colonization. I mean, I saw that in the Spanish writers. Sorry, if I'm being a little bit pushy. I can see there's a Rizal here. I want to ask you, I was reading about Pedro Paterno, and Pedro Paterno was a lawyer by training, right? He would cite some things about international law. Are you familiar with any legitimate international legal arguments from the Filipino Ilustrados against itong right to colonization or the Philippines' right to self-determination? I'm sorry, I was just thinking if you're legally geeky and historically geeky, baka balikan mo yung some of this work. Sorry, Justice, I'm pushing you on this. I know.
Yeah, well, Apolinario Mabini was a lawyer.
Yes.
And he was, of course, the author of the Malolos Constitution, and he understood international law. But going back to what I was saying, uh, the when the framers of the 1945 Constitution uh, were drafting the Constitution, they realized that they had to change the rule. The might is right, which was the rule since the dawn of human civilization up to 1945. They said if we continue with this rule, might is right, the world will end because we already have the nuclear bomb. With the nuclear bomb, you cannot afford a rule where might is right. If you have a territorial dispute, you go to war. Whoever wins is awarded the territory. You cannot have that kind of rule when there are nuclear bombs, because that will mean the end of humanity. That's the end of human civilization. So the two fundamental principles of the UN Charter are this: all disputes between states must be settled peacefully by negotiation, mediation, arbitration. And the use of force or the threat of force is outlawed, prohibited. Because of that, for the last 79 years, we did not have a third world war. But Russia now is overturning that, using force, actual invasion to get the territory of Ukraine. So they're going to war to settle a territorial dispute, which is a no-no. So if they win and they succeed in getting the territory of Ukraine, that will be the end of the United Nations Charter. And in Asia, China is using threat of force to grab the territory and maritime zones of its neighbors. So these two countries are trying to overturn the legal order because the UN Charter says the use of force and the threat of force is outlawed. But both of these countries, Russia is using actual force.
Absolutely.
China is using threat of force. So we have to understand that we are in a critical point in human history, that if Russia and China succeed in overturning the existing rules-based order under the UN Charter, then what will happen?
That's a very good point. Is this the book by Ona Hathaway and Shapiro? How a radical plan to outlaw war remade the world the internationalists. I mean, I'm just wondering. I think
yes, yeah, I think you're
it
correct.
looks amazing. Yeah, this looks. Thank you so much, Justice. I'll definitely check this. I think the role of international law is very underappreciated in our let's say pedestrian discourse, sometimes even in policy discourse. So I really suggest people to check it out. I mean, I also see the relevance of that because there were some people who are trying to use the Dresden bombings, German bombings, to justify a recent war in the Middle East. You know what? And someone said, actually, that's why we created international law after World War II, so that you don't go bomb the whole city of another country because they killed some of your people. It doesn't work that way. So I think the contribution of international law is very important. And the reason I'm glad you mentioned Mabini, and to a certain extent, I also mentioned Paterno among others, is that we are a nation of world-class lawyers, not in terms of just lawyers who are good in making money or, you know, presidential spokesman one day, ex-human rights one. Hindi yung mga ganun. No, people who use lawfare to protect the interests of smaller countries. So thank you so much, Justice Carpio. It looks like this is kind of like your life legacy, right? I mean, this be the man who puts his might behind what is right, right? I mean, I don't want to be sentimental, but I am a sentimental person, Justice Carpio. It looks like that's your animating force, right? And that's the idea animating your actions.
Yes, well, we don't really have a choice. We are fighting China, nuclear armed, with the largest naval fleet in the world and largest submarine force, largest Coast Guard. We will lose definitely if we go toe to toe with China in the south, to a forum where there's a level playing field, and that level playing field is the arbitral tribunal.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, Kiboloy na nga lang, di natin mahuli-huli yung China pa. But thank you, Justice. I was hoping to end on a more hopeful note, but nevertheless, I am very stoic like you. I'm like, do what is right regardless of the results. So we have to fight the good fight. Bear and forbear. Thank you so much, Justice Carpio. Mabuhay ka, and I'm sorry if I'm going back to you every weekend, but I'm not sorry, because I think your views are very important, and I need the Marites on Quiboloy and Davao every other week. So hopefully we can have you back soon, and hopefully even more, Pakulo, to discuss.
Of course, anytime. I'll be happy, Richard.
My pleasure, and I think our supporters, and daming mga comments here, ang daming natutuwa, natatawa at the same time dun sa discussions natin. Justice Carpio, mabuhay ka. Have a lovely weekend and a blessed Sabbath day. On Sunday, of course. God bless. Thank you.
Good day.
Good day.